Welcome to week 4 status report on my self-connection 30-day challenge. And for those people who don't know what I'm doing, I highly advise you that you stop this video and actually start on video 1, which I'll actually have linked in the description so you guys can actually see why I started this 30-day challenge. Now, this week, I must say, I have really been intrigued with this whole idea of this self-connection, right? So much so, I've actually, gone back through some of the videos that Kyle Cease had originally posted, only to find 2 books that he suggested by Mark Singer that I've already read one and actually done a book review on. And I am currently in the process of reading the second book, which is actually called The Untethered Soul, I believe is what it's called. And these books are actually phenomenal reads, right? And I can see how the self-connection is actually supposed to help you, more in life. And so over the past week, right, I've definitely felt like a peace and a calming coming over me. And it's surprising, right? Because myself, I have never been a person that was, not to say that I was friendly. I've always been friendly and stuff like that. But the biggest thing is understanding that, again, I feel at peace, which I haven't really felt at peace with myself. I've never felt that way at all in my life, right? I've always been a kind-hearted person. I've always been willing to help anybody, but this is different, right? This is a different feeling. Now, I know I had talked about my vibe changing and stuff last week and how I felt different. I felt like my energy changing, and this week, it's just been more of it, right? I just feel more at peace. I feel more relaxed. I'm not stressed about anything. And in reading those books by Michael Singer, I've definitely seen why, right? Now, the first book I actually read from Michael Singer was The Surrender Experiment, which I did a book review on. And that book was just about his life, right? And how he essentially closed himself in to just meditate, right? His life was going horribly bad, right? The girl broke up with him, and he just wanted to, remove that old shell of himself. And so he essentially, has a van and moves out to the middle of nowhere and lives there just to meditate, right? Because that's the only place he finds joy. And his story essentially builds from there, right? And he ends up, developing, this contractor business, and then he actually ends up, getting the first, personal computer and going on to eventually create WebMD, right? And so his story is essentially phenomenal, and that's what that book primarily is about, his story. Now, the new one I've actually been reading is actually called The Untethered Soul, and this actually gets more into what I've been doing, right? This self-connection and understanding this concept, right? That we should essentially be asking ourselves the question of who are we and what that exactly means, right? Now, when someone asks you, who are you? You're like, well, what do you mean? I'm me, right? And now what does you mean, right? Now, does you mean the physical body? Does you mean that conscious state? And it just really dives into that, right? It really dives into, looking at it from the concept that, when you watch a movie, right, you use your sight and sound, right, when you're watching that movie, and you really get into a movie, so much so that you actually can feel everything that the character in the movie is feeling. Right? Now, when something happens in your environment when you're watching that movie, you get shocked and you jump back into your own body, right? And you're like, okay, well, now I'm this 37-year-old man again, okay, everything's good, and look back at the movie, and then you get engrossed in the movie again, right? Till the movie ends, and then you jump back into yourself. Now, that is what's extremely intriguing, right? So he goes about talking about this concept that self-awareness, right? That when you are actually trying to, do this self-connection, that we are more than just the self-awareness in itself. You have to think about all these thoughts and ideas and everything that comes into your life as just objects, right? Like essentially good or bad, to not see it as good or bad, because if you actually, label it as good or bad, those are things we hold on to. And he talks about this other concept about, when you're driving down the road, right, you see the trees on the side of the road, but you don't really register them, right? They go through, and you know your line of sight, you know that they're there, but you don't essentially establish any kind of emotion to those trees, right? But then again, you can also drive across a car, buy a car, say a green car, that you think some girl in that car that's driving looks like your ex, and then there's some guy next to him who, you know, looks like he's giving her a hug, right? And so your brain starts playing all these things and your day is just ruined, and then you just associate little things like that, right? As opposed to anytime something happens in your life, to just let it be, and don't associate it with good or bad, and kind of just look at it objectively, right? And just, okay, that is what it is. And so this, essentially what his book is about is enlightenment, right? And looking back on how, you know, you can be more self-connected. And, you know, the Dalai Lama talks about this as well, and the fact that, you know, to be enlightened, you can't do it over a night, right? You can't do it over, you know, 1 to 3 years. It takes decades, right, to really be enlightened. But that doesn't mean that you can't get the benefits along your journey. And that's the same way, even if you look like at fitness, right? And I always reference fitness and use fitness as an example because a lot of people can see the results when you're actually working out and stuff. And it takes time, right? But if you're going to the gym consistently, you notice after a month, after 2 months, 3 months, you start seeing results, right? And it's the same way with this. I'm already starting to see results, and it's only been 4 weeks. Now, I do plan on continuing this out and making this as part of my lifestyle, right? Is to find that self-connection, right? To essentially just continue doing this and enjoying, you know, my search for enlightenment, right? Essentially. And I feel better, and I've been trying to essentially establish that, you know, to where I'm not, every thought that comes up during my sessions, like I just let it be what it is, right? And I noticed that I normally tend to do that, but an idea will come up, right? Just a random idea, which has been happening, and then I start giving it a little thought, right? And I try to avoid from doing that, and sometimes, you know, that thought lingers a little bit longer than it probably should, but nonetheless, as soon as I catch myself, right, as soon as I'm aware, I let it go. And so, you know, just reading these books, right, they really, especially this, you know, the Untethered Soul is really helping with that, in the aspect that it's allowing me to understand what I should really be doing, right? Because that's essentially what I did. I wanted to read books that could get me more insight onto, you know, how I should be doing this. I guess the proper way. There's no proper way of doing this, but more of a guide, right? And so I've really, again, been enjoying these sessions, and I'm finding that energy, and this book is really helping me, right? Because I'm doing the 30-day challenge and reading this book, which I've started reading it today, and I had a long run today, so I was able to actually read or listen to quite a bit of the book already. And so it is, again, really helping me like establish like what I should be doing when I'm looking for enlightenment, right? And just this, again, this concept that, you know, it's more than yourself, right? Now, I know a lot of people they get really kind of cringy, and they don't like talking about that stuff because people can't see the results, right? And a lot of people aren't willing to put in the time to allow themselves to get connected with themselves and try to feel that enlightenment, right? And know that it's going to be a long journey. It's not just a 30-day challenge, right? Now, this was just essentially to see if I liked it. I have started seeing results from it. I have really enjoyed it. I feel like my energy has changed. And again, that book talks about, you know, the energy essentially in it through this whole process, right? And not putting these blocks up. This is why I mentioned, you know, you don't identify anything as positive or negative, because of the fact that when you do that, when you tie some kind of emotion, your mind starts playing tricks on you, right? And you're supposed to get out of your mind. So essentially, being is like looking at yourself from that third-party perspective, right? And understanding that this is essentially what you are right now, but you can't really identify, right? It's something you really have to dive and you have to work at, right? And it's, again, it takes like the Dalai Lama says, many decades. It's not something you do overnight, and something you work on, right? It's just like any muscle. You have to constantly be working on it to be able to establish that connection. And so again, after just 4 weeks, I've already felt a difference. I felt a change in my energy. And again, it's not something that I think a lot of people understand unless you actually do it, right? And I myself, I have again changed so much over this past year that I was willing to put in the time and effort to actually see what it would do. Because again, I went vegan, like I talked about in my last video, and so this was the same kind of thing, right? I'm gonna challenge myself and see what comes of it. And again, I'm enjoying the benefits out of it, and I can also see where you can implement different things, right? If you can get to that stage, especially like the example I gave out of the book about watching the movie, right? And I think this is where this concept of visualization really plays a difference, right? Because if you can visualize yourself, you know, in a position that you want to be in, visualize, and then start using all your other different senses, right? Using your hearing, what do you hear? Using your taste, using your touch, using a bunch of different senses, right? If you can do that during visualization, I can see why, you know, you start being drawn to those things, especially seeing it from this perspective, right? Because this is the way our, you know, self-awareness is, right? Our consciousness is. And again, you can see this, anybody can see this by watching a movie. They feel like the out-of-body experience because you are essentially playing whatever character in that movie. And again, is one of the best examples I've heard, right, through this whole process. And so again, it gives me a lot of perspective into how to come across these self-connections, right? And when you get intrigued about something, get curious about something, right? Like you start doing these different things and you want to know more. And so again, this is why I started reading those books, because I was like, I'm enjoying it, and I have some concept of what I should be doing, but I guess I just wanted more in-depth understanding. And again, those two books, you know, put it in perfect perspective on what you should be doing and what it can do for you in the long run, right? When you get in that flow and you're not blocking things from your heart, you're essentially letting all the light into your life that should be there, and not, you know, good or bad, it is what it is, but you're just gonna let it go through, right? You're not gonna sit and dwell on anything, because it just essentially bleeds over into everything. And you really realize that a lot of different terms are used to describe this same thing, right? And it's, again, really intriguing, right? It's like it's like you go down that rabbit hole and there's just more and more stuff, right? And so again, I've really been loving this. And you know, my whole life I haven't really been a spiritual person, so for me this is something that's really new, right? And something that I am really enjoying, and something that I think a lot of people can't grasp because they don't want to grasp. They want to see everything. And I used to, you know, think to myself that I was a realist, right? And if I don't see it, it's not possible. But you know, everybody thought the world was flat at one point, and only to determine it was round. Now some people still think it's flat, but nonetheless, I mean, that's it, right? Like, a lot of things can't be explained. And yes, you know, not to get too far out there, but you know, you really have to have an open mind about these different things. We don't know everything. You can assume you know things, but unless you actually put yourself in the driver's seat and actually try to do these things and try to change yourself and really see what it's all about, you really have no understanding. And you have to really give it time, and you have to really make sure you're doing it right. That's why I've, again, been reading these books, because I really wanted to make sure I was doing this right, because I am enjoying it. And again, this is something I'm going to go past 30 days. I don't know if I'm going to be doing status reports on it, but I will definitely say that I'm enjoying this journey, and I'm glad I can actually be sharing it with you guys. Now, I'm actually coming down to the fact that I've only got a couple more days before I do my, you know, final analysis on this whole thing. But again, it's been positive, right? And I try not to label it as positive or negative, because that kind of defeats the whole purpose of what I'm doing here. But just to open that flow make sure that that flow is working the way it should be working. So nonetheless, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, smash that like button, and until next time, I will see you guys later.